I still remember the day it all began, as if it happened just yesterday. The air outside was sharp and cold, the kind of Boston morning where the frost on the windows looks like delicate lace. Our old two-story house on Maple Street felt quieter than usual, almost heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I was curled up on the sagging sofa in the living room, wrapped in my faded wool blanket, sipping the last of my coffee. The floorboards creaked every time the wind pushed against the house, and the smell of my father's pipe tobacco still lingered from the night before. For the past few weeks, my brother, Daniel Harris, had been acting strangely. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was an edge to him. He avoided eye contact, his voice grew short whenever I asked him where he'd been, and his phone seemed permanently glued to his hand. I told myself it was nothing. After all, we'd grown up together in this same house. We'd shared school lunches, Christmas mornings, and late-night drives to nowhere. I had always believed that, despite our arguments, there was an invisible thread between us. Looking back now, I realized that thread had already frayed. That afternoon, while folding laundry in my room, I decided to check my phone. There it was, one after another, a line of bank notifications I had missed earlier. My eyes scanned the screen, and at first I thought there must be some mistake. But as the truth set in, my stomach sank like a stone thrown into a deep well. Every single dollar from my account was gone. All of it. $28,400. My hands started to shake. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of being violated, of someone slipping into your life and taking more than you thought they could. I went to my purse, the one I always kept tucked between my bed and the wall, and my heart dropped again. The small leather wallet I kept there had been opened, and the ATM card I had trusted to stay safe was gone. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. I rushed down the stairs, almost tripping on the last step, and the front door swung open just as I reached it. Daniel walked in, grinning like he had just been crowned king of the world. He didn't look like someone who had just drained my account. He looked satisfied, almost smug. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Daniel, where's my ATM card?" He tilted his head slightly, as if the question amused him. "Your work is finished," he said with a casual shrug. "We got what we wanted. Don't look back at us now." His words hung in the air, cold and final, like a door slamming shut in my face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the collar and shake the truth out of him. But he had already brushed past me, heading to the kitchen without a care in the world. I stood there in the hallway, my hands clenched into fists, listening to the sound of the refrigerator door opening and closing, the clink of ice dropping into a glass. By evening, I saw exactly where my money had gone. Daniel was standing in the driveway, leaning against a brand new black luxury car. The thing looked like it had been pulled straight from a glossy magazine. The leather seats still smelled new. The chrome wheels caught the fading sunlight like mirrors, and the paint was so flawless it reflected the bare winter trees. He ran his hand over the hood like it was some sort of prized animal. "What do you think?" he called out to me. "What do I think?" I could barely get the words out without my voice breaking. "I think you stole from me." Daniel chuckled, the kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. Like I said, don't look back. Then he slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and the deep roar of it echoed down our quiet street. I stood there on the porch, shivering, not from the cold but from a mix of rage and disbelief. My mind was spinning. How could he do this? We had grown up under the same roof, eaten at the same table, and shared the same parents. And yet, in that moment, I realized that whatever I thought family meant, it clearly didn't mean the same to him. As night fell, the glow of the street lamps cast long shadows across the snow, and I sat in my room staring at the empty space where my wallet used to sit. I replayed the day's events over and over, trying to make sense of them, but nothing about them made sense. I had trusted him. I had defended him so many times before when other people warned me about his selfishness. Now I could feel that trust turning into something else, something hard and bitter. I didn't yet know that the money Daniel had taken wasn't really mine. I didn't yet know that he had unknowingly stolen from someone else entirely. But what I did know, as I lay awake that night, was that something inside me had shifted. The house no longer felt like home. Daniel was no longer just my brother. He was the person who had shown me, without hesitation, that he could take everything I had and still look me in the eye with a smile. The hum of the heating system filled the silence, and outside, a light snow began to fall. I could hear the distant sound of his car pulling into the driveway again, the tires crunching against the frozen ground. Somewhere in the house, my parents were talking, their voices muffled through the walls. I didn't go down to join them. I didn't want to see the look on Daniel's face again. That night, I decided something quietly, without speaking it aloud. I would never forget this day. I would never forget the way it felt to stand on the porch, watching him drive away in something bought with my trust, my patience, and my money. I didn't yet know where that decision would take me, but it was the first step toward walking away from him, and from all of them forever. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, the kind that feels like it comes from more than just lack of sleep. My room was still dark, the heavy curtains keeping out the pale winter light, but I could hear voices downstairs. My parents were in the kitchen. I could tell by the rhythm of their conversation. My father's slow, measured tone and my mother's light, almost airy responses. I took a deep breath, pulled on a sweater, and made my way down the creaking stairs. The smell of toast and strong coffee filled the air. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd walk into the kitchen and find them as shocked and angry as I was. Maybe they'd already confronted Daniel, demanded he return the money, or even called the bank. That hope was the only thing keeping my legs moving. When I stepped into the kitchen, my mother, Linda Harris, was seated at the table, a delicate china cup balanced between her fingers. She was stirring her tea slowly, as though there was nothing in the world that could rush her. My father, Robert Harris, sat across from her, reading the morning paper, his glasses sliding halfway down his nose. "Morning," I said, though my voice was tight. My mother glanced up and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't meet the eyes. "Morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" she asked, as if we weren't living in the middle of a crisis. I didn't bother answering. "We need to talk about Daniel," I said firmly. "He took all the money from my account. Every dollar. 28,400. He bought himself a car with it." My father lowered his paper, his expression unreadable. Then, to my disbelief, he gave a small shrug and said, "It was a good decision." A hot wave of shock and anger rushed through me. A good decision? He stole from me. And you're just what? Fine with it. My mother chuckled softly, like this was nothing more than a story she might tell her friends over lunch. "Oh, come on now. Daniel's always been the ambitious one. At least he's using the money for something." I stared at them, my words caught in my throat. This wasn't the reaction of parents concerned for their child. This was pride. They were actually proud of him. It was in that moment that the strangest thought hit me. My father's tone, my mother's laughter. There was something off. Something I was missing. I walked to the counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and leaned back against the sink. And then it clicked. The account Daniel had emptied, it wasn't mine. Not in the way they thought. I had been managing that account for months, ever since my father admitted he didn't trust online banking. "Too many scams," he had said, handing me his bank card with a look of relief. "I know you'll take care of it." The money in that account wasn't my salary or savings. It was my father's pension. Every single dollar in there was from his years of working, saving, and planning for retirement. Daniel thought he had stolen from me, and my parents thought I had lost my own money. But the truth? The truth was that Daniel had stolen from our father. From the very man sitting at the table, praising his good decision. I nearly laughed right there in the kitchen. The irony was too rich. My father, still holding his newspaper, had no idea that his life savings had been traded for a gleaming black luxury car sitting in the driveway. My mother, sipping her tea, had no idea that her golden boy had just burned through the only financial safety net they had. I kept my expression neutral. There was no point in telling them now. Not yet. Part of me wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize the truth. Another part, if I'm honest, wanted them to feel the sting of betrayal that I had felt. "Fine," I said finally, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. If that's how you see it, then I guess there's nothing more to say. My father nodded, already turning back to his paper. My mother added a dash of milk to her tea and began talking about some neighborhood dinner she wanted to attend next week. They had dismissed me, just like that. As I left the kitchen, I felt an odd sense of detachment settle over me. It was as if I were stepping back from my own life, watching it from the outside. They thought they had sided with the winner, but I knew better. I knew that Daniel had just set in motion something none of them were prepared for. That day, I stayed quiet. I didn't confront Daniel, I didn't explain the truth, and I didn't warn my father. I simply went about my routine, moving through the house like a ghost. At lunch, I overheard Daniel in the living room, bragging to one of his friends on the phone about the sweet deal he had gotten on the car. I could picture him leaning back on the sofa, his feet on the coffee table, grinning like the world belonged to him. I thought about the account, the years of pension deposits, the careful budgeting, the sacrifices my father had made to save that money. And then I thought about the car payments Daniel would now have to make, the insurance, the fuel, the repairs that would inevitably come. He had no job that could support that kind of expense. Not without help. And when he went looking for that help, he'd find nothing but empty pockets. That night, lying in bed, I allowed myself the smallest smile. It wasn't a smile of joy, or even of revenge. It was the smile of someone who knows a truth no one else in the room understands. They had laughed at me, dismissed me, and told me not to look back. But they had no idea they'd just dug a hole so deep that none of them would be able to climb out. I didn't feel sorry for them. Not anymore. It was almost a week later when the truth finally caught up to them. I had been expecting it like you expect the first storm of winter. You know it's coming, you just don't know the exact moment when the clouds will finally break. That morning, I heard my father's old pickup rumble out of the driveway. He was heading to Vermont, where he owned a small piece of farmland he'd been tending for years. It wasn't much, just a few acres, a weather-beaten red barn, and a cluster of buffalo that had been in our family for as long as I could remember. He'd been planning to repair the barn roof before the snow got heavier, and I knew he intended to use money from what he believed was still sitting in his pension account. I was in my small rented apartment in Boston when the phone call started. The first one I ignored. The second one I silenced. But when my phone buzzed a third time, I answered, mostly out of curiosity. "Where is it?" My father's voice was sharp, stripped of the easy warmth it usually held. "Where's what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "The money," he barked. "I went to the bank in Montpelier, and they said there's nothing left. Not a single dollar." I could picture him standing there at the counter, the banker giving him a polite but firm explanation, and the dawning realization that the pension he had worked his whole life for was gone. "Ask Daniel," I said quietly. There was silence on the line for a few seconds, then the sound of him breathing heavily. "Daniel," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. And then, without another word, he hung up. I didn't need to hear what happened next to know it was loud. When my father returned home, he didn't walk in calmly. He stormed in like a man possessed. I was told later that the door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled on the walls. My father's voice carried through the house, calling for Daniel over and over again, each shout more furious than the last. Daniel, of course, tried to talk his way out of it. He always did. He probably told my father it was a misunderstanding, or that he'd borrowed the money and planned to pay it back. But there was no way he could have hidden the truth, not when the evidence was parked in the driveway. That black luxury car no longer looked like a trophy. It looked like a curse. The payments alone were more than Daniel had ever handled in his life. Add in the insurance, fuel, and the fact that he had no steady income, and the shine started to fade fast. By the second week after the truth came out, my father had stopped speaking to him entirely. My mother, who once laughed at Daniel's ambition, now avoided eye contact whenever he entered the room. The house was tense, the kind of tense where you could hear every footstep in the hallway, every cupboard closing in the kitchen, every sigh that escaped into the stale winter air. But for Daniel, the real trouble was just beginning. Without me around, there was no one to feed the buffalo in the early morning, no one to clean the barns, and no one to take the milk to the small markets in Vermont where local buyers waited. Those buffalo weren't just animals. They were part of my father's livelihood. Without the income from them, bills started piling up. And without me there to bridge the gap, Daniel was left to face the mess alone. The thing about Daniel was that he had always been good at playing the part of the charmer, but terrible at actual hard work. The first week, he tried to manage the buffalo himself. He overslept, forgot feeding times, and more than once left the barn doors open so long that the animals wandered out into the yard. The neighbors complained, my father yelled, and Daniel's temper flared. By the end of the month, the situation had gone from bad to desperate. Daniel couldn't make the car payments, the insurance company was hounding him, and the fuel tank was often so low he barely made it home from town. I heard from a neighbor that the car, once spotless and gleaming, was now streaked with road salt and sitting lopsided in the driveway with a flat tire. The yelling in the house became a constant. My father's voice, once filled with laughter, was now sharp and bitter. My mother's tea-sipping calm had vanished. I imagined them sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where they had laughed at me not long ago, now whispering about overdue bills and whether or not Daniel could sell the car. I didn't feel sorry for them, not even a little. They had made their choice when they sided with him and mocked me. They had chosen to believe in Daniel's illusion, and now they were living in the reality he had built, an empty bank account, a useless car, and a farm slipping into disrepair. Occasionally, I'd get a text from Daniel, something vague like, need to talk, or, we should figure this out. I never replied. I knew what he wanted, help. The same help he had thrown away the moment he told me not to look back. There was one night, just after a heavy snow, when a mutual friend sent me a photo. It was Daniel, standing outside the barn in a thin jacket, holding a broken shovel, looking like he'd just been through a war. His expression wasn't one of anger this time, it was defeat. That was when I realized something important. The fall wasn't just about losing money or facing bills. It was about watching the walls close in, slowly, until you had nowhere left to go. Daniel was feeling the weight of every choice he had made, and there was no easy way out. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. It was a gray, rainy afternoon when the knock came at my apartment door. The kind of rain that falls in steady sheets, turning the city streets into rivers and making the world outside feel smaller, quieter. I had been curled up on my couch in my small New York City apartment, sipping a cup of hot tea, while the sound of rain against the windows filled the room. I wasn't expecting company, and when I first heard the knock, I assumed it was a neighbor who'd locked themselves out or a delivery for the wrong apartment. But when I opened the door, there he was, Daniel. He didn't look anything like the smug, grinning brother who had stolen from me and driven away in his brand new car. His hair was messy, matted down in some places from the rain, and his jacket was thin and damp. I caught the faint smell of wet hay and farm mud clinging to him, and beneath that, the sour trace of exhaustion. His eyes were ringed with shadows, the skin beneath them pale and worn. I need you to come back, he said without even greeting me. His voice wasn't demanding this time. It was low, almost pleading. I can't do this without you. For a moment, I just stood there, taking him in. My mind flicked back to the day he'd told me, your work is finished. We got what we wanted. Don't look back at us now. The same mouth that had said those words was now asking for my help. The same hands that had taken my ATM card were now hanging limply at his sides. What exactly do you want me to come back for? I asked, my tone flat. He shifted uncomfortably. The farm's falling apart. Dad won't talk to me. Mom barely says 2 words. The buffalo, they're sick, I think. And the car, he stopped himself, glancing away. I need help. You always kept things running. I didn't realize how much until you weren't there. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. Daniel wasn't here because he missed me or because he wanted to make things right. He was here because the mess he'd made had finally become too big for him to clean up alone. Inside my apartment, the warm air wrapped around me like a shield. I thought about how far I had come since leaving the house in Boston. My life here in New York wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had a steady job at a small bookstore, a space of my own where no one could take my money, my privacy, or my peace. My bank account was mine alone, and every dollar in it came from my work. I also thought about the way my parents had laughed when I told them Daniel had stolen from me. The way they had sided with him, without hesitation. The way they had looked at me like I was the problem for even bringing it up. That memory still burned in my chest, but it also reminded me of why I left. "No, Daniel," I said finally, my voice steady. "You took what you wanted. Now live with it." His head jerked up, like he hadn't expected me to say no. "You're going to let everything fall apart?" "I didn't let anything fall apart," I replied. "You did. You made your choices. And so did I." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stepped back into my apartment and started to close the door. "You didn't care when you took from me," I said, my voice quieter now. "You didn't care when you told me not to look back. So don't look back at me now." For a moment, he just stood there, the rain soaking his hair and dripping onto the hallway floor. I saw the frustration in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched like he wanted to say something sharp, but he didn't. He just turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hall. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. I felt no guilt, no second-guessing, just relief. Over the next few weeks, I heard bits and pieces about what happened after that day. A mutual friend told me the car had finally been repossessed when Daniel couldn't make the payments. Another neighbor from Boston mentioned that the Buffalo had been sold off because my father couldn't keep up with them anymore. The farm, which had been in our family for decades, was starting to look abandoned. And as for my parents, they stopped calling altogether. I knew it wasn't because they didn't have my number. It was because without Daniel's illusion of success to cling to, they had nothing to say. I didn't miss them. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss the cold, heavy air that always seemed to hang over that place, even on sunny days. In New York, the rain eventually stopped, and the city came alive again with the sound of tires splashing through puddles and people laughing under bright umbrellas. I started taking long walks through the streets, stopping at little coffee shops and bookstores I'd never noticed before. I learned the names of the shop owners in my neighborhood. I planted a small basil plant on my kitchen windowsill. I built a life, one small piece at a time. Every so often, I'd think about Daniel, not with anger, but with a kind of detached clarity. I realized that walking away hadn't just been about leaving him. It had been about reclaiming myself, my independence, and my sense of worth. The life I had now was proof that I could survive without them. More than that, it was proof that I could be happy without them. On the first anniversary of the day I left, I went to my favorite cafe, ordered a slice of carrot cake, and sat by the window watching the city go by. The memory of that porch in Boston, watching Daniel drive away in his stolen glory, came back to me. Only now it didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It just felt like another chapter of a book I had already closed. And I knew, without any doubt, that I would never open it again.